Hi, my name is Abby. This is the second episode of a podcast about knitting and other fiber arts. You may know me from More Knits on Instagram. I don't video myself or show myself often over there, so you might not recognize me, but I do run the Instagram More Knits. I started this podcast several months ago, and I just never got around to filming a second episode. I've been doing a lot of knitting and working on different projects since then, and this video podcast is a project that I've wanted to start for a while, and I just, it kind of keeps falling flat. So I'm gonna try again, and we'll see where this goes. So I wanted to share a little bit more about myself. I didn't really do that on the first episode, and I know, especially on Instagram, you can kind of get lost in just photos of knitting, and sometimes it's hard to get to know the person behind the camera. So as I mentioned, my name is Abby. I live in the northwest of the United States. I go to university here. I love knitting. I learned to knit when I was around 10 or 11 years old. My aunt taught me, and I learned how to crochet before that, so I was familiar with fiber arts. And I liked knitting. I thought it was cool. I remember I knit a dishcloth, which is kind of the worst first project, but I mean, I finished it and I liked it. But it didn't really take off from there. I didn't love it. I had a lot of hobbies that I was interested in, and knitting didn't actually kind of take over my life until about a year ago, last January, so the beginning of 2017. And that's when I really started to read about knitting. I was doing a lot more research. There were a lot of designers, independent designers that I was following and learning about their stories, and I just wanted to learn more about this craft. I wanted to take my hobby to a little bit of I wanted to elevate it a little bit, kind of take it to the next level. And so that's when I really became interested in knitting. I taught myself how to knit in a more comfortable way. I'm a continental knitter. But the way I knit was kind of awkward, and so I retaught myself how to knit, and that really changed the game a lot for me. So there's a little bit of background about me. I'm going to share more as time goes on. So for this podcast, I would love for it to happen every 2 weeks. I'm a very busy student, though. I'm a full-time student. I have 2 part-time jobs. I'm trying to design on the side. So I don't think it's going to happen every 2 weeks. What I'm more thinking is going to happen is about once a month. So we'll see, again, where that goes, but that's kind of what you can expect from me for now. So I have my projects, finished projects and works in progress, in this box here, so that's what I'm going to start with. I'm going to show you a couple of my finished projects. I'll move on to works in progress, and then I will share a couple of future projects, and then also a couple of my own personal designs. I am an aspiring independent designer. I recently published my first pattern this year. And so I'll show that to you. I only have a few patterns out this far, but that's another thing you can expect to see, is documenting the process of learning how to design and kind of becoming somewhat of an independent designer. I've only self-published on Ravelry. I do have one of my designs published in a magazine, and maybe I'll talk about that sometime, but at this point I'm only planning on publishing to Ravelry, so I do expect to share my experience with that, and the process of just learning how to design and how to do something like this, how something like designing and publishing knitting patterns can actually happen. So I have my coffee here. I hope that you are drinking or snacking on something that you like. So let's get started with finished projects. I finished this cardigan last weekend, and this is actually my first sweater, so I'm very excited about it. I'm going to show you a bit more details about it, but I'm going to talk a little bit first. So this is the Exeter by Michele Wang. Michele Wang is a wonderful designer. She's kind of known for her cables, and she just has beautiful designs. This was the first pattern that I had knit from her before. So this is a paid for pattern. I started this on November 9th of 2017, and I finished it January 20th of 2018. Stand up a little bit and show this to you because I feel like you're not really getting a great view of it. So you can see it has this gorgeous cable motif. The sleeves are cuffed, and so it's nice and cozy. It has this beautiful shawl collar in the front, which is my favorite. And in the back here, you can tell that it kind of comes to a point there in the back, and the rest of the back is just covered in cables. And one of my favorite parts are the pockets. I love pockets, and I just think they were so much fun to knit, and I think they're gorgeous in this cardigan. So the yarn that I used was Knit Picks Wool of the Andes in the colorway Mink Heather. This is obviously not the suggested yarn. I did change it. I did do research though. I believe the yarn suggested in the pattern is Brooklyn Tweed Shelter. This is a much heavier weight. It's still worsted weight, but it's much heavier than Shelter, I believe, is. So this is so warm. But in terms of using this yarn as a replacement for the suggested yarn for this pattern, I think it worked really well. I did use a little bit more yardage than was required for the pattern, so keep that in mind if you do plan to substitute this yarn. I love the look of it. I think it worked up really well. It has that structure that's really needed for a cardigan like this. It's not particularly soft, but it's very woolly and warm. It's not scratchy, but it's not particularly soft. So it's, you know, I don't necessarily prefer softer yarns. I kind of like that woolly feel, but that is something to keep in mind if you plan on using this yarn. My number one reason for using this yarn was it is inexpensive. We all know Knit Picks, it's a pretty quality brand. Most of their yarn is pretty decent, but it is very affordable. And as a college student, you know, I don't have a ton of money to spend on my hobby, so this was a really affordable substitution, and I'm really happy with it. I used the exact same needle sizes in the pattern, so a US 5 for the ribbing and a US 7, 4.5 millimeter for the cabling, and then a US 5 is a 3.75 millimeter if you go by metric. And I got gauge first try. The pattern asks you to knit 3 gauge swatches, and so I knit my 3 gauge swatches and blocked and let them dry, and I immediately got gauge, so that was really easy for my first sweater. Yeah, this was a lot of firsts for me. Again, first sweater. I did mess up a few times. There was a mistake on the back where I think I started on the cabling chart. I started on the wrong row, and so I had to like rip back 20 something rows of progress, and then I knit too much of the ribbing in the front, which, like, how do you knit too much of 2x2 ribbing? I don't know. I was just getting overzealous. I knit like 5 inches too much of the ribbing, so that was kind of annoying. But other than that, you know, I made a few mistakes and I just ripped back and re-knit it. It was not that big of a deal. I can be kind of a perfectionist, so I do like to rip back any mistakes that I make, but I try to be a bit more casual with my knitting. I try to remember that this is a hobby and it's supposed to be fun, and this cardigan was definitely enjoyable. I loved every stitch knitting this. I love cables. I loved knitting the cables. Seaming it even was fun. I will say though, seaming it up is almost as much work as knitting it. It took me way longer than I anticipated. And it wasn't very difficult to seam it up, but it was definitely a labor of love. Anyway, I'm really proud of this cardigan. I love it so much. I love wearing it, and I love that I have been almost granted this pathway, this avenue into sweater knitting now, because I've knit my sweater, it turned out, and I just love it so much, and I loved knitting it. And so I've cast on another sweater that I'm going to share with you in a little bit, but it was very, very exciting to me when I finished blocking and finished seaming, and I put it on and it fit, and it was just such an exciting experience. So if you have ever wanted to knit a sweater and you're kind of intimidated by it, I would say don't be intimidated. Just take it step by step. Make sure you get gauge, and follow the pattern. It's relatively simple, and also I would say that there are plenty of people who are willing to help on Ravelry. Even some of the designers are available to help you if you get stuck. So Ravelry is definitely a great resource if you are new to knitting, if you kind of don't really know what you're doing, but you still want to try anyway. I would say go for it. So I'm going to move on to a couple of other finished objects. I am a fairly recent sock knitter. I started knitting socks summer of 2017 was the first pair of socks that I knit. And I liked it. It was not as difficult as I thought it was going to be, as every sock knitter will tell you. They're not difficult. But I wouldn't say that I fell in love with socks until this fall and winter, when I started wearing the socks that I was knitting. And that's when I really kind of fell in love with socks, because they're fun to knit, they're great to have as an easy project that you can just always keep in your bag or always have a pair on the needles. But when you actually wear your hand knit socks, the experience is just so luxurious. It's amazing to wear hand knit socks. It's like you're walking on a cloud. They're just so nice to wear that I kind of feel like I can't make up excuses to not be knitting socks, because I really want to wear hand knit socks all the time, and I only have a couple of pairs. And I did share a few pairs of socks that I had finished in my last episode, but I finished a few more, so I'm going to share those with you. I have 2 pairs here. The first pair are the Smooth Operator socks by Susan B. Anderson. I cast these on September 20th, and I completed these January 23rd of this year. So these took me a while, and I don't really know why they took me that long to finish. I just, I was working on them, and then I set them down for a few months, and then I would pick them back up again. And anyway, this is a paid-for pattern. If you know much about knitting designers, you've probably heard of Susan B. Anderson. She's amazing. And she created this sock pattern with an afterthought heel, and this is specifically for striped or patterning socks where you don't want to mess up the pattern by inserting a heel. So it is knit after you finish knitting the foot. And I just wanted to try an afterthought heel. I'm relatively new to sock knitting, so I've been wanting to try new techniques. I started off with the heel flap and gusset heel, and then I moved on to short row heels, and now I've tried the afterthought heel, and so there are a couple of more heel patterns that I want to try, but this was a fun experience to try the afterthought heel. I will say though, it doesn't quite fit my foot the way that other heels have, and so I'm not sure if I will knit this again. If I knit striped or patterning socks, I'll probably knit an afterthought heel because I just think it looks really nice. But if I'm just knitting socks for myself and I'm wearing them in my shoes, you know, I'm not sure if I'll go to great lengths to make them look super nice, or to implement a technique that doesn't really fit my foot. That kind of defeats the purpose, in my opinion. But I did enjoy knitting these socks. It was great to learn a new technique, and I think the red heel and toe looks really nice. So some details about these socks. I used Knit Picks Stroll Solid in Dove Heather, and Hollyberry, I believe, is the red. This is a very affordable sock yarn. It is, let's see, did I write down? I don't think I wrote down the content, but I believe it's 65% wool and 35% nylon. Maybe it's 75-25. It's something around there. So it's merino wool, but it does have that nylon content to help make them last longer. I used a US 1 2.25 millimeter needle. I used the Addi Turbos, which I like. I don't like as much as the ChiaoGoos though. ChiaoGoos are my favorite needle, and I recently bought an interchangeable set, so maybe I could talk about that sometime. But yeah, it was a great pattern. I would definitely recommend the pattern. It was very well written. They were fun socks to knit. So the second pair of socks I have are the Pebbles socks by Knitting Expat, and these I knit in this pink and purplish gradient yarn. This is another paid for pattern. It's only a couple of dollars. And this was really fun to knit because, as you can see, there's a bit of texturing on the leg and the foot. And so it just gave a little bit of interest. It was a lot of fun to knit. So I started these January 1st and I completed them January 24th. So the yarn is a yarn I got from someone who was destashing, and she just sent me this yarn. I'm not a huge pink person, but I did really like this yarn. I like the gradient. I did not try to match the colors up because I didn't really want to waste yarn. So I just knit. I stopped here and started again here. So I just knit one by one rib. I don't remember what the ribbing is in the pattern. Another modification I made was I knit a 60 stitch sock instead of the 64 stitch because that fits my foot a little bit better. I like tighter fitting socks. So that's a modification that I've learned to make for most patterns, is to knit them on 60 stitches instead of 64 stitches. This wool is 75% wool and 25% nylon, so it's pretty sturdy. I've worn them a few times. I have washed them since then. And I really actually liked this yarn. I'm not sure if I would buy it on my own. I was looking on the website and it looks like you have to buy it in like a set of 5 skeins or something. So I don't know if I would buy that, but you know, having given it as a gift, I definitely enjoyed knitting with it. It was really nice. It is a single ply though, so I know some people don't like to knit socks in single ply yarn. So we'll see how they hold up. Oh, another thing I modified was the heel. So if you follow Knitting Expat, Mina, you will have seen the garter stitch heels that she sometimes knits. And the pattern didn't say to knit the heel and garter stitch. It's just a German short row heel. But I just wanted to try it. I mostly wanted to try it because I felt like it would be a little bit sturdier. So again, we'll see how that holds up. But those are the only modifications that I made for this pattern. Okay, last finished object that I want to share with you is one of my own designs. I actually don't have the gloves here, but I published a crochet and knit pattern. So as I mentioned earlier, I do know how to crochet, and I do enjoy crocheting. I don't have a passion for it like I do for knitting, but I did publish a pattern that involves both crochet and knitting. So if you know how to do both, maybe this pattern is for you. It's a hand mitts pattern called Anchor. The cuff is knit in ribbing so that it's quite stretchy and it kind of conforms to the wrists and really holds them tight to keep your hands warm. And then the body is knit in this crochet, so it's a little, it creates kind of a different texture, and they also knit up super quickly. So that's available on Etsy and Ravelry if you would like to check it out. I just wanted to share because I have made quite a few of these pairs. I made a pair for my boyfriend. He wears them literally all the time. He loves them. He wears them more than I do. And it was just, you know, it's a pattern I published this January, and so that was a lot of fun just to work on and publish that. So I want to move on to whips now, works in progress. The first project I have to share with you is a really exciting one, and it is my second sweater. So I'm going to pull that out right now. Okay, so this is the Tegna by Catlin Hunter of Boyland Knitworks. This is a sweater slash t-shirt. It's more of a t-shirt style, so it's short sleeved. It's also very loose and very flowy. It's more of a spring or maybe fall or potentially summer garment. It's not a heavy cardigan like this one is. And so I've only just started, but the reason that I am sharing this with you is because this is actually the second time that I've started this. I knit in about 40 rows of the wrong size, and I'll share a picture of kind of the progress that I had made up to that point. It wasn't much, but I am sharing it even though I've only knit a few rows on this version, just because I did actually knit more and I just kind of wanted to document that. So this is another paid for pattern, and the yarn that I'm using is gorgeous. I do want to mention, I'll talk about why I'm knitting a different size at the end of this, but I'm going to talk about the yarn and the pattern a little bit more first. So the yarn that I'm using is Manos del Uruguay in Alegria in the colorway Overo. I don't speak Spanish, but it is this beautiful yarn. The colorway is so pretty, and it's not neat at all, which is so funny. I'm definitely a neutrals girl. I know I just showed you pink socks, but I definitely prefer neutrals. But I was at my local yarn shop the other day, and I was trying to find yarn for this project, and I just kept being drawn to this yarn. It's got the cream in it, and then it has kind of this mauve brown, and then like a bluish gray, and it's a little bit speckled. It's a little bit variegated. It's really, really beautiful, and I love that I'm branching out a little bit because, you know, this is still pretty neutral, but it has those pops of color, and I really like that. So I think it's going to be perfect for this sweater. It's a mostly stockinette sweater. It has lace at the bottom, but I think that stockinette stitch is really going to allow the colors to it's really going to show off the colors well. So this is 75% merino wool and 25% nylon. So hopefully I'm hoping it will hold up. It is very, very soft and very lovely to work with. So I want to talk about gauge for a second and why I had to restart knitting this. So I finally got gauge on my third attempt, which, it's not that many times to knit a gauge swatch. But the reason I want to talk about this is because the pattern does not specify whether or not to knit your gauge swatch in the round. Most of the sweater is knit in the round. I know the top part, kind of above the arms, is knit flat I believe it's above the arms, it's knit flat. But the majority of the sweater is knit in the round. And my in the round gauge is very different from my knit flat gauge. My purl stitches are a lot looser than my knit stitches. So I know that my gauge really changes if I'm knitting in the round versus knitting flat. And I almost knit my first 2 swatches in the round, but I decided, you know what, the pattern doesn't specify, so maybe it's supposed to be knit flat. And, you know, maybe up top is where there's gonna be most of the shaping, and so maybe my gauge really matters at the top versus knit in the round. And I think that was a mistake, because when I cast on, I finally got gauge, my second try, and I cast on the small size. I'm usually a small in most patterns. And you know, I got 40 or so rows in, and I realized that my gauge knitting in the round was so much smaller than my gauge knit flat, and I knew I was not getting gauge in the round. I had gotten gauge knit flat, but I knew that what I was knitting currently was not to gauge. And then I got concerned about yardage, because I had taken all of the yarn from my local yarn shop, and I was concerned I wasn't going to have enough yarn, and I was concerned it wasn't going to fit right. And so what I did was I reknit my swatch again. I took the sweater out. I knew that wasn't going to work. I reknit my swatch in the round, so you can see all of the yarn with the trick where you just carry the yarn on the back, so you are knitting every row. You don't have to purl, but you also don't have to knit actually in the round. And you can see my gauge is very, very loose, which I'm okay with. This is it's a warmer, it's a garment for warmer weather, and so I kind of like that loose gauge. The gauge in the pattern is also, it's this tension. It's very, very loose. It's 22 stitches to 28 rows over 4 inches in fingering weight yarn. So very loose. And I knew, I'm a pretty tight knitter, I knew I was gonna have to go up quite a few needle sizes. So I went up 2 needle sizes in order to get this gauge. But that's just kind of a lesson. If you know you'll be knitting most of the garment in the round, even if the pattern doesn't specify to knit your gauge swatch in the round, if you have that discrepancy between knitting in the round and knitting flat, like I do, I would recommend gauging in the round, because not only is you know, the size going to be affected, but also the amount of yardage that you use is going to be affected. So yes. Thankfully, I decided to rip back before I got too far in, but yeah, I started again last night, and I'm only a few rows in, but I'm really, really excited about this project, and I can't wait to share more. I love the lace. The lace is a lot of fun to knit. Oh, I did want to mention that I am alternating skeins. So if you saw when I was holding the yarn up, both skeins have been used. I'm alternating skeins every 2 rows, because this is quite heavily variegated and speckled, and it is hand-dyed yarn, and I don't like pooling, especially on stockinette projects, so that is why I'm alternating the skeins. Okay, so the only other projects I have on my needles right now are a couple of designs in progress, and so I'm not going to share a lot about them, but I am going to show them to you. As I mentioned in the beginning of this video, I'm an aspiring independent knitwear designer, and I have a few of my patterns published, but that's definitely something I would like to get more into this year, is designing and publishing patterns. I love knitting so much. I love everything about it, and designing your own patterns is so fulfilling. It's an amazing experience, and you know, it's just something that I love to do. I certainly don't rely on it at all for any sort of income. I have other jobs for that, but this is just something, you know, it's a hobby right now, and I just love it a lot. So I'm going to show you a pair of socks that I'm working on. I love vanilla stockinette socks. I think they are great because they're so easy. You can knit them without looking. You don't have to worry about a pattern. They're great, right? But knitting these pebble socks, where it just has that little bit of texture on the top, really made these socks fly by because it's a 4 round repeat. And so I just really loved like getting to that 4th round that had the texture in it. I don't really know what it is about it. I think it's similar to knitting striped socks for a lot of people, where you just really want to get to the next stripe. And just having that texture just on the top of the leg and the foot really, I just really enjoyed knitting those socks. So I wanted to try to design a pair that gave that same feel while you're knitting it. It's still a lot of fun to knit. It's super easy. Okay, I'm just going to show them to you. So I've started the leg here in this beautiful kind of forest green tweed. I love tweed yarn. So here's the front of the leg, and you can see it's just a very simple, lightly textured pattern. And on the back of the leg, it's just plain stockinette. And when I say this is easy, like this really is almost as easy as vanilla socks. But I don't know, I'm kind of obsessed with just that slight bit of texture. I think that's why I really love the Pebbles socks by Mina, because, I don't know, just that little bit of texture really elevates the socks for me. So I've started with 1x1 twisted ribbing for the cuff, and then it just goes straight into the texture, and it kind of flows. My light's changing with the green color, but it kind of flows into the texture on the leg. So I'll share more about this design when it gets closer to being published, and I do have a couple of testers who are interested in testing this, but if you are interested in testing it, it will need to be tested in a couple of weeks. So write a comment or message me on Instagram or get in touch with me in some way. I'll also leave my email address if that's easiest for you. If you are interested in testing, I do have a few guidelines, but we can talk about that. So, you know, if you are interested, if you like the design, I will be looking for testers pretty soon. A segment on my podcast that I'd like to implement when it is applicable is future projects. So I'm not going to start this project until I've finished my sweater that I'm working on. But I just wanted to share with you because I'm really excited about it, and I like to plan things out, and so I like to plan, you know, my future projects. So I have this yarn here that I picked up at another local yarn store, and this is Madeline Tosh Vintage, and as I mentioned, my purple is my favorite color, and so when I saw this, I knew I had to knit something for myself with it, and it's a very slight tonal. It's almost a solid, but you can see in the light there, it just illuminates the different tones in the color, and I just think it's gorgeous. So this is a worsted weight yarn. The color is Penumbra, I think is how you say that. And I'm going to knit the Quadri hat by Michele Wang. I'm excited about that. I would love to return to cabling, but not, you know, such a giant project, a giant cabling project after I finish this cardigan. So this will be a nice kind of touch of cabling when I finish my lace sweater without, you know, being a huge undertaking. So Jacqueline of the Brooklyn Knit Folk podcast knit this a few episodes ago. She talked about it, and she knit this hat, this beanie, for her coworker, and I think she knit it in like a day or like a few days or something ridiculous like that. It was like 2 or 3 days, weekdays, and seeing the beanie that she knit just like made me want to knit the hat. And I was just like, yes, I'm going to knit that. It is gorgeous. So I found the yarn, the perfect yarn for it. I'm really excited to knit that. I think that's all I really have to share about future projects. I do have one more thing that I wanted to mention, and this is not something that I'm knitting yet, but I'm not sure if you are familiar with buying sweaters, especially at a thrift store, and then ripping them out and reusing the yarn to knit with. But I've seen quite a few people do stuff like that, and I think it's really cool. It's awesome to recycle. You get yarn for, you know, pretty cheap. But I found this sweater dress. I shared this on my Instagram. It's by Wilfred Free, and it says that the yarn is made in Italy, and it's a really gorgeous wool. And the whole sweater actually is knit in reverse stockinette, and you can see it's a pretty large garment, so it's long sleeves, and it was in the sweater aisle at the thrift store, but on me it's a dress. And so I'm pretty sure that it is a sweater dress. I'm pretty sure, but I think it is actually a sweater dress. Regardless, there is a lot of yarn in this sweater. And I found it for around $4 US. So, you know, if this actually works and I can get all of the yarn out of this, that's gonna be an amazing deal. That's almost getting the yarn for free. But you do have to work for it. And a couple people asked if I would share the process of kind of deconstructing the sweater and maybe finding the right pattern for it, and just kind of how I'm going to do that. And I would be happy to document the process, so I am planning on doing that. I will say though that I've never done this before. I've just seen other people do it. So I'm not sure if I'm necessarily going to do it correctly, but I will try to do it so that, you know, it actually works. And all of the seams are exposed. It's a beautiful sweater. I wish that it fit me. It doesn't really fit me quite right, but when I saw it, I knew that, you know, I at least had to try to turn it back into yarn. So these are the seams, and this looks exactly like mattress stitch, and I'm pretty sure that that's about as simple as it's going to be, is to kind of unpick the seams. I know some manufactured seams are not, you know, some commercial sweaters, you can't just rip out the yarn, and so you have to be aware of what types of sweaters you can do that with. So anyway, this is not something I've ever done before. I've kind of had it in the back of my head to do it at some point, but I wanted to share that with you in case you're interested in following along. I did wash it with a bit of wool wash, and it came out beautiful. So I'm really excited about that. Anyway, I'm gonna stop the video. I've been talking for a long time, it feels like. And I hope that I will continue to film these videos, and that, you know, someone is interested in seeing the projects that I'm working on. All of the projects that I've shown you today and the information and the details about the projects will be listed below in the description. So if you're interested in, or if, you know, you couldn't remember what one of the patterns was called or something, you can find all of that down there. I hope you have a lovely day. And I would love to get to know you. So if you want to leave a comment and let me know who you are and how you got into knitting, I would love that. So, okay, I will see you in a few weeks. Bye.